Animation isn't easy, it requires a lot of effort, it requires a lot of time. Just look at the credits to any animated movie and you'll see hundreds of names needed to bring that project to life. Or look back at the history of YouTube and you'll see in 2016 how independent animation was virtually wiped from the site overnight. When the algorithm switched from views to watch time, suddenly animators putting in weeks of work to produce 1 or 2 minute shorts couldn't compete with low effort, long form content featuring people with no discernible talents or insight speaking into a camera or microphone. Like this video. With that in mind, Away is a 2019 Latvian animated feature film by Gints Zilbalodis. And when I say by Gints Zilbalodis, I don't just mean directed by Gints Zilbalodis, I mean everything. Direction, design, character modelling, story, music, sound effects, editing, and yes, animation, all produced by one person. Quite frankly, it is an insane undertaking, one that most people probably wouldn't have even considered possible. There are animated shorts by single individuals and live action shorts that are written, directed, starring and edited by one person, but this is a feature-length film. I don't think that's ever been done before. But what's more is that the finished film itself is actually pretty good. And that's before you take into account that one person made it, or the story behind its production, or how this film is opening up doors, not just for its own creator, but for other filmmakers all around the world. With a lot of its creative decisions being made as a result of both the liberation and limitations of working solo, it's fair to say that Away makes for an interesting viewing experience. Describing the movie makes it feel like the sort of lost media thing that might end up on a Wang video. The story opens up on a young man dangling from a parachute caught on a tree. He surveys his surroundings before being eaten and shat out by some kind of giant void gorilla. Vorilla? I guess if it's eating him, it kinda makes sense. After escaping the creature, he makes his way to a secluded valley that prevents whatever it is that's chasing him from entering. So it waits. While in that valley, he befriends a bird which is lost from its flock, as well as finding a motorbike and a map, showing him a route from the valley to the other side of the island. The boy decides to leave the valley and see where the trail leads him, but not before the bird tries to fly away, taking it on a collision course with the dark spirit, which transforms into an amorphous blob and absorbs the bird, but then the boy ventures into the giant void blob to rescue the bird, and I suspect at this point you're starting to realise that this is one of those movies where it's a little bit pointless to explain the plot. The narrative of Away isn't really what's impressive here though. It's more the tone that the movie creates, thanks to Gints' understanding of filmmaking techniques. In interviews, he's spoken about being influenced by live action directors more than animators, mentioning Alfonso Cuarón specifically and his use of long, continuous scenes with seamless transitions. Gints recognises how useful that could be in the controlled environments of 3D animation, and it's evident right out of the bat with his use of long sweeping shots. He treats the camera like a character itself, preferring dynamic camera movements over sharp cuts wherever possible. When it does come to animation, however, he cites Hayao Miyazaki as his main source of inspiration. And he seems to draw on Miyazaki's ability to create settings with a certain dreamlike quality to them. The dreaminess of the setting mixed with the swooping camera movements and rudimentary 3D textures gives the movie a very specific feel that is undeniably game-like. I'd almost describe Away as a film for people who like video games but don't play them. It's reminiscent of titles like Journey, Eco or Shadow of the Colossus. So many of the film's elements seem to contribute to this game-like quality, from the voiceless protagonist, to the journey being separated into distinct level-like chapters, to the specifically curated environments, which feel designed to push the player towards their next challenge. Even the pacing, which Gints has stated he made deliberately slow because he finds most animations frenetic and overwhelming, feels like a game, as though the player is taking a breather to strategize on how to overcome the next obstacle. As the film has no dialogue, there is a real emphasis on the sound design and score to speak up. Like the rest of the film, Gints' music is slow, considered, and ambient, setting the atmosphere and not being afraid of empty moments of silence when needed. And he's also able to create real moments of tension through his use of simple sound effects partnered with his camera work. But behind all the impressive technical expertise is a story which reflects its writer and his journey. A young man isolated, a bird lost from its flock, venturing out alone on a long, daunting quest to reach out and connect with others. The story mirrors its creator and his own tale to produce this movie. Creating Away took Gints 3.5 years, which is a reasonably fast turnaround for an animated feature, particularly one that doesn't have any other team behind it. But he began working on this film shortly after leaving high school. He had no university qualifications or industry connections. After producing a series of animated shorts by himself, Gints managed to secure some funding from the Latvian Film Board to create another. This new short eventually became the first chapter of Away, and he planned to produce more which would eventually form a full feature. After the Film Board agreed to finance the project in full, Away's total budget came to €50,000, which is a generous grant, but absolutely minuscule when compared to the budgets of even independent animated features, especially seeing as this was supposed to support Gints for 3.5 years. On such a small budget, hiring other people simply was not an option. But rather than finding the thought of going solo intimidating, Gints has commented on how freeing he found it. Working alone allowed him to approach the movie however he wanted. He was free to adapt and experiment with the story as he saw fit, never needing to justify or burden anybody with his decisions or demands, and discovering benefits to truly independent filmmaking in a way that almost nobody else has ever experienced. Still though, despite the liberties, Gints was not entirely free from having to think practically. So much of what gives Away its unique flavour is the result of practical constraints. The small number of characters and lack of dialogue were a decision based on keeping production feasible. Models and animations are recycled for ease of management, and the motorcycle was included because it's easier to animate. But Gints seems to find a way to use these limitations to best effect. Having so few characters makes the lack of dialogue seem more natural, and focuses the film towards visually communicating the character's simple goal to the audience, with music and visuals that make for some truly beautiful moments that overcome the limited animation. 3.5 years is a long time to be working on a project without any outside assistance or affirmation. Though he'd shown pieces to friends and family, the full film had never been seen by anyone other than Gints until a screening in Zagreb. And to even get there must have taken an insane amount of not just effort, but self-belief and mental strength. It was only when deep into production that Gints recognised the reflection of himself within his story, and that his own desires to form connections were mirrored within his character's quest. It's fitting then that the recognition that Away received has allowed him to do just that. Back home in Latvia, his film opened the Riga Film Festival, as well as playing festivals in London and Tokyo. Away was on the long list for the 2019 Animated Feature Oscar, and it won Best Animated Film at the Latvian Film Awards and the inaugural Contrachamp Award at Annecy. Away has propelled Gints from some kid working on a personal project in his bedroom to a pioneer of independent film production. Not only is he now part of that film world that he wanted to connect to, but he's opening the doors for others to do the same. Gints has been invited to talk and give seminars in countries that have no creative animation industry to speak of. The achievement of Away, the film made entirely by one person, sounds impossible, and maybe a few years ago it was. But the democratization of digital filmmaking and animation tools like Blender means that it's now more possible than ever for independent animators to tell their stories. Gints might be the first, but I doubt he'll be the last.
Yeah. Now in these places where there isn't an industry, it's a good time, because now the technology is allowed like pretty much everyone to make films.
And if you're interested in watching Away, it's available to purchase on YouTube. But clearly the system that YouTube set up didn't anticipate a feature where the main character isn't actually played by anyone. So above Gints Zilbalodis' name as director, it lists the film as starring Boy, which is the main character's name, but then it must have also required a surname, so according to YouTube the star of this movie is Boy, which, if that is not a leading man's name, I don't know what is. Thanks for watching.